A rural girl is forced to wed a comatose tycoon until the day he suddenly awakes. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or your country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The fluorescent lights inside the VIP medical ward hummed softly, a constant reminder of the sterile quiet that ruled this floor. The air carried that familiar scent of antiseptic, cold metal, and something heavy, something like fate settling over the room. Emma Carter stood hesitantly at the doorway, her hands clenched around the strap of her worn purse. Her simple rural dress looked painfully out of place among the polished chrome rails and the wall of digital monitors. She swallowed hard. They said this room belonged to Grant Morgan, a billionaire tycoon who had been in a coma for 6 months after a mysterious car crash. They also said something else, something she still could not fully process. She was now legally his wife. The hospital director had spoken the words very plainly just an hour earlier. "Miss Carter, you signed the marriage papers yesterday. That makes you Mrs. Morgan. Whether you intended a real ceremony or not, the contract stands. Legally, you are the only person with full authority to oversee his care." Her ears had rung. She had only signed because she was trapped, cornered by circumstances so cruel they barely felt real. The family of the tycoon had come to her rural home with a proposal wrapped in velvet and threats. She would marry him, in name only, in exchange for protection for her father's failing farm and the medical expenses piling up like a mountain she could not climb. If she refused, they would take everything. If she agreed, they would save her family. She had not known that stepping into that courthouse would take her all the way here to the bedside of a man she had never even met awake. Now Grant Morgan lay motionless beneath crisp white sheets, his chest rising in slow, steady rhythms. The monitor beside him blinked with green pulses, each beat eerily calm. His face, though pale and thinner than the magazine covers she had seen online, still carried that unmistakable presence. Sharp jawline, faint stubble, the kind of refined strength born from years of command. Emma approached him slowly, her boots tapping softly on the marble floor. "This does not feel real," she whispered, her voice almost trembling in the cold air. She placed the small, embroidered handkerchief she had sewn herself on the bedside table. It looked painfully humble against the sleek machines, but it was the only thing she could bring from home, the only proof that she had not disappeared entirely into someone else's world. A nurse walked in, glanced at her with a mixture of pity and recognition. "You can talk to him," the nurse encouraged gently. "Even if he cannot respond, patients in comas often register familiar voices. It can help. Familiar." Emma almost laughed at the irony. She was a stranger, married to him by force, tied to his fate through legal ink and desperation. Yet as she stood by his bedside, something inside her softened. She reached out, brushing the back of her fingers lightly against his cold hand. "Hello, Grant," she whispered. I guess we are married now." The words felt strange, like they belonged to someone else. She took a small breath and continued. "I do not know if you can hear me, but they told me I am supposed to stay here. They said you should not be alone. I do not know if I can help, but I will try." Her voice faltered. Back in her small town, she talked to animals, to crops, to the sky before rain. Talking to a man who might never wake up felt just the same, except this time the silence held real weight. She pulled the chair closer and sat, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "You know, at home, when storms hit the tin roof, I used to tell stories to calm myself. Maybe I can tell you one. Maybe it will help." There was no reaction, no twitch, no flutter of eyelids, but somehow speaking eased her breath. Outside, rain began to tap softly against the tall windows, each drop echoing like a quiet drum. Emma leaned closer, her voice gentler now. "Grant, I hope one day you open your eyes. Even if it is just long enough to tell me who you really were before all this." The monitor beeped steadily. She did not notice the slight shift in its rhythm when her hand brushed his again, nor the faintest movement in his index finger. And somewhere behind the layers of silence and coma, something inside the billionaire stirred, subtle, almost imperceptible, but real. Emma stayed by the bed, unaware that fate had already begun to shift. Emma returned to the room the next morning with a cup of warm water and a careful resolve settling inside her chest. The sun had barely risen, washing the hospital corridor in pale gold. For a brief moment she allowed herself to hope that maybe, somehow, the world would be more forgiving today. But as she pushed the door open to the VIP ward, her heart tightened at the sight of the expensive machines, the silent walls, and Grant Morgan lying exactly as she had left him. The nurse from yesterday smiled gently as she updated the chart. "You came early again," she said. "Most family members take days off. It is exhausting work. I am not really sure what I am supposed to do," Emma admitted, "but I think he should not wake up to an empty room." The nurse paused, studying her with a softer gaze this time. "That is kinder than you realize." When the nurse stepped out, the silence returned, steady and heavy. Emma placed her jacket over the chair and pulled it close to the bedside. She held the warm water in her hands, letting the heat seep into her chilled fingers before she set the cup down. "Good morning, Grant," she said quietly. "I hope you slept better than I did." She tried to smile, but the weight of everything pressed down harder today. Her father's farm miles away, the medical bills still waiting, the pressure from Grant's powerful family. She had traded her freedom for survival, but sitting here, she could not help wondering if she had entered a world colder than the problems she had left behind. Emma reached for a clean cloth and dipped it into a basin of warm water. She moved slowly, wiping his hands and arms with care. The gesture was simple, routine, and yet something in it felt personal. She remembered the nurse's words from the night before, how patients in comas sometimes sensed voices, warmth, presence. She hoped that was true. She hoped he felt at least a little less alone. "You know," she murmured, "when I was younger, my grandmother used to say that speaking to someone who cannot answer is still speaking to a soul. I never believed her. Maybe I should have." She brushed a strand of hair away from his forehead, noticing how tired he looked even in stillness. His breathing was steady, but his face bore the exhaustion of battles fought long before she entered his story. "I do not know who you were before that crash," she continued. "A powerful man, a difficult man, a good man. I have heard all kinds of stories. But here, like this, you are just a person who needs someone to stay. And at least for now, that someone is me." She set the cloth aside and reached for a stack of books a nurse had left to entertain her. Most were medical guides or magazines, nothing that felt comforting. Instead, Emma chose her own voice. She leaned closer, speaking softly. "I want to tell you about home," she said. "The field behind our house always caught the morning light just right. My father and I used to check the crops before sunrise. The grass was cold enough to sting your ankles, and the sky smelled like rain even on dry days. It was quiet there, too quiet sometimes, but it was ours." She paused. For a second, she imagined Grant, listening. Imagined some part of him holding on to her words like distant memories. The thought pulled her deeper into the story. "My father still believes that storms come to test us," she said. "Maybe this is my storm. Maybe yours, too." She inhaled slowly, letting herself settle into the chair. The room felt different now, as if her words had filled the space with something warm enough to soften the edges of the machines. After a few minutes, she stood and opened the curtains a little more. A thin line of winter sunlight stretched across the floor and climbed the base of his bed. She hoped it could reach him. She hoped something would. Emma returned to his side, adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. "I am not sure how long I can keep doing this," she whispered. "But I will stay today, and I will stay tomorrow. That much I can promise." She reached for his hand without thinking, her fingers brushing lightly over his. The touch was gentle, barely a whisper of contact. She did not see the slight twitch in his fingertips, or the subtle shift on the monitor behind her. She did not see the way his breathing deepened for a single moment before settling again. All she knew was that she had chosen to stay, even if nobody else believed her presence mattered. Emma sat quietly, folding her hands on her lap as the morning sun slowly filled the room, unaware that something deep inside the Comatose Tycoon had begun to stir. Emma returned again that evening, unable to explain why she felt drawn back after such a long day. Something about the quiet of Grant's room felt different from the rest of the world. Out there, people judged her, whispered behind her back, questioned her purpose in being here. In here, she could simply exist. She could breathe. The machines hummed softly, the lights dimmed to a warm glow, and for a moment she felt she could hear her own thoughts clearly. She set her small paper bag on the bedside table. "I brought fresh fruit," she said gently. "The nurse told me they mix it into your nutrition formula. I hope it helps, even a little." She sat beside him and noticed the embroidered handkerchief she had left the day before. A nurse had folded it neatly, placing it near Grant's left arm as if it belonged there. Seeing it made her chest tighten. It was the only piece of her rural life that had crossed into this foreign world of wealth and machines. Somehow, that small fabric stitch felt like an anchor. Emma dipped a towel in warm water again, just as she had been taught. She cleaned his face slowly, careful around the edges of the monitor patches. "You know, I used to help my father clean up after long days on the farm," she said quietly. "He would fall asleep in his chair, covered in dust, and I would wipe his hands just like this." She paused, letting the memory wash over her. "He always said that taking care of someone is the purest kind of respect. I guess I believe him." Emma reached for a comb and gently brushed Grant's hair, smoothing it away from his forehead. He looked peaceful, almost younger, when the shadows moved away from his face. She studied him for a moment, wondering what kind of man he had been before the accident. Most people saw only the billionaire. She saw something different in this stillness, vulnerability, fragility, and a story she did not yet know. "I wish I knew what you were thinking," she whispered. "Or if you are fighting to come back. I hope you are." She set the comb down and pulled her chair closer. "The doctors say progress is slow. They say you may never wake up, but I do not want to believe that. I cannot believe that." Outside the window, the sky turned a deep blue, the city lights sparkling like distant stars. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how small she felt in this enormous place. She leaned forward and lifted his hand again, holding it with gentle fingers. "I want to tell you about the cat that used to sleep under our porch," she began softly. "He was an old stray, missing part of one ear. My father said he looked mean, but he was the sweetest thing if you fed him warm milk." She smiled faintly at the memory. "One winter, he disappeared for days. I thought he had died. But then he showed up again, limping, exhausted, but alive. My father said, 'Some creatures just need someone to wait for them.' I guess that is what I am doing for you." For a moment, silence stretched between them so deeply that Emma could hear her own heartbeat. She rested Grant's hand back on the bedding and stood to adjust the warm towel on his forehead. As she leaned over, she did not notice the small flicker beneath his eyelids. She did not see the subtle tightening of his fingers or the way the monitor beeped half a second faster. But she felt something, an instinct, a whisper of a shift in the air. She looked down at him again, uncertain. "Grant, did you just move? Or am I just tired?" There was no response, only the steady rhythm of the machines. Emma let out a shaky breath and sank back into her chair. "I am probably imagining things," she said softly. "But if you are trying, keep trying, please." The lights dimmed further as night fully settled outside. Emma folded her hands in her lap, fighting the heaviness in her eyelids. She had not planned to stay this late. She had not planned for any of this. Yet she remained, her presence filling the quiet room. As she drifted into a light doze, the faintest movement stirred in the billionaire's hand again. His fingers twitched once more, this time with intention, almost as if reaching toward the warmth of the girl who had chosen to stay when no one else would. Emma slept on, unaware that the first true signs of awakening had already begun. Emma woke with a start, her neck aching from the awkward angle she had slept in. The lights in the room had shifted to their early morning setting, a soft, amber glow that made everything look gentler than it truly was. She rubbed her eyes and tried to gather her thoughts. She had not meant to fall asleep, but exhaustion had finally caught her. Grant lay exactly where she had left him, but something felt different. She could not name it at first. Maybe it was the air, or the faint tension she sensed when she stepped closer. She checked the monitor. The rhythm was steady, but slightly higher than last night. She frowned, unsure if it meant anything. "Good morning," she whispered. "I did not mean to fall asleep on you. I hope the chair was not snoring." Her voice tried to be light, but her heart was uneasy. She reached for the warm towel and began her routine again. Wipe his arms, brush his hair, adjust his blanket. Familiar motions that kept her hands steady even when her thoughts were not. As she lifted his hand to clean around the IV line, she froze. His fingers shifted under her thumb. Not a twitch. Not the tiny spasms she had convinced herself she might have imagined. This movement was real, slow, deliberate, a faint squeeze. "Grant," she whispered, leaning closer. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. His face remained still, expression unchanged. She held her breath, waiting for something else to happen. But the room went quiet again. Her pulse hammered. "I know I felt that," she said, her voice unsteady. "I know I did." She pressed the call button. A moment later, the nurse hurried in with a clipboard. Emma stepped back, pointing at Grant's hand. "He moved," she said. "Not like before. He really moved this time." The nurse checked his reflexes with a penlight and light pressure. "I do not see anything unusual," the nurse said gently. "Muscles sometimes react involuntarily. It can happen even without brain activity." Emma felt heat rise in her face, a mix of frustration and hope battling inside her. "I am telling you." He squeezed my hand. "I felt it." The nurse offered an apologetic look. "I will make a note for the neurologist, but until we see consistent changes, it is best not to get your hopes too high." When she left, the room fell silent again. Emma closed the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing hard. She looked back at Grant. "You did move," she whispered fiercely. "I know you did, and I am not giving up on you." She walked back to his bedside and took his hand again. She waited. She watched every small twitch of his eyelids, every subtle change in his breath. Nothing happened, but she did not let go. After several minutes, she began speaking again, her voice soft but steady. "If you are trying to come back, keep trying," she murmured. "I am here. I will not walk away." The sun rose higher, casting long rectangles of light across the polished floor. She opened the curtains wider so the warmth reached his bed. "You know," she said, "when I was little, my father used to say that winter eyes always open slower. He meant the animals on cold mornings, but maybe it is true for people too." Her attempt at humor faltered, but she held on to the idea anyway. She leaned closer, studying his face. "You have been in the dark for a long time," she whispered. "If you can hear me, follow the light." A soft knock at the door interrupted her. A neurologist entered, flipping through his chart as he approached the bed. Emma stepped aside but stayed close. He ran through his routine, reflex checks, pupil response, muscle tone. He paused longer than usual at the monitor, frowning slightly. "His readings are different today," the doctor said. "Nothing dramatic, but noticeable." Emma's heart leapt. "Different how?" "Heightened responsiveness," he replied. "Subtle, but it could mean the brain is becoming more active." She swallowed hard. "So, he is waking up?" The doctor held her gaze for a moment. "It is too early to say, but do not underestimate small steps. They matter." When he left, Emma sat again, her hands trembling slightly. She reached for Grant's hand one more time. "If you are fighting your way back," she whispered, "I will stay right here." She did not see it, but as she spoke, a faint shiver ran through his fingertips, just enough to show that somewhere beneath the stillness, Grant Morgan was slowly reaching toward her voice. Emma stayed close throughout the afternoon, too alert to sit for long, too anxious to step away. She kept her eyes on Grant's face, searching for any trace of that movement she had felt earlier. The memory of his fingers squeezing hers replayed in her mind, clear and undeniable. She refused to let the doubt of others drown it out. By early evening, the room grew dim again. The hospital lights shifted into their soft, nighttime glow, and the sounds of distant footsteps faded down the hallway. Emma pulled the chair closer and rested her elbow on the edge of his bed. "I wish they believed me," she murmured. "But maybe it is better that they do not. Maybe this is something just between us." She reached for another warm cloth, repeating the careful routine she had learned. Each motion steadied her breath. She brushed his hair gently with her fingers, letting them linger near his temple. "I wonder what you were like before all of this," she said softly. "I have read your name 1,000 times online. Grant Morgan, the relentless tycoon. Grant Morgan, the empire builder. Grant Morgan, the man people feared to disappoint. She sighed quietly. But here, you look like someone who has been fighting for a long time, someone who is tired, someone who deserves a chance to come back. Emma placed the cloth aside and opened the curtains just a little. The pale lights of the city blinked beyond the glass, reflecting against the window like scattered stars. When I was a child, on nights when storms kept us awake, my father would light a single candle in the living room, she continued. He said a tiny light is enough to tell the darkness it cannot have the whole house. She smiled faintly. Maybe I am trying to be that candle for you. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. If you can hear me, even a little, keep holding on. As she spoke, the heart monitor beeped slightly faster, a rhythm shifted by something invisible but real. Emma blinked, leaning in. Grant, is that you? Still no movement. Still no opening of his eyes. But the steady rise in the monitor continued, subtle but unmistakable. Her breath shook. You hear me? She whispered. I know you do. A soft knock came at the door. The night nurse peeked in. Missus! Morgan, you should get some rest, she said kindly. You have been here since early morning. Emma shook her head. I am fine. He needs someone here. The nurse hesitated before stepping inside. She adjusted a few monitors and checked his vitals. Her expression shifted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. His readings are strong tonight, she said. Much stronger than usual. Emma felt her heartbeat quicken. What does that mean? It means something is changing, the nurse replied. Maybe you should keep talking to him. It seems to help. When the nurse left, Emma sat again and took Grant's hand. She rubbed her thumb slowly across his knuckles, grounding herself in the warmth beneath his skin. I am here, she said. I will stay through the night if I need to. The minutes stretched, turning into an hour. Emma kept talking about her father, the little porch cat, the sunsets back home, the things she had missed while living under the weight of responsibility. The more she spoke, the more she felt the heaviness in her chest ease. At one point, she reached for her handkerchief and used it to wipe a stray tear from her cheek. When she placed it back on the table, she noticed something, a faint shift in Grant's breathing, almost like a soft exhale that did not belong to the mechanical rhythm. Grant? She whispered, leaning forward. Are you trying to wake up? His eyelids fluttered. Just once. So brief, she nearly missed it. But it was there. Emma covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes flooding with disbelief. You are fighting, she whispered. You really are. The room felt alive suddenly, charged with something electric and fragile. She clasped his hand with both of hers. I am right here, she said. Come back. I am not leaving. As she held on, another shiver moved through his fingers, small, weak, but undeniably intentional. It was the first true answer to all the words she had poured into the stillness. Emma leaned closer, her voice trembling. I believe in you, Grant. Just keep coming back. Outside the window, the city lights glowed softly, unaware that inside this quiet room, a man long lost to silence was beginning to return, drawn by the warmth of the only person who refused to give up on him. Emma barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she feared she would miss another flicker of movement. She stayed in the chair beside Grant's bed, her fingers wrapped gently around his hand, her heart aching with hope. The hospital wing was quiet, lit by the soft glow of night lights, and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor felt almost like a heartbeat echoing her own. Just after dawn, something changed. Grant's hand twitched again, stronger than before. Emma sat up straight, breath catching in her throat. Grant, can you hear me? His eyelids fluttered once, then again, as if fighting through layers of darkness. Emma leaned closer, barely breathing. You can do this, she whispered. I am right here. Follow my voice. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a slow, shaky effort, his eyes opened just slightly. The room seemed to freeze around her. His lashes trembled, his pupils unfocused and struggling to adjust to the light. He blinked again, the tiniest motion, but real, alive. Emma's voice broke. Grant, you woke up. You are really waking up. His lips parted, the first attempt at a breath that belonged to him and not the machines surrounding him. A rough sound escaped his throat, fragile and strained. His gaze drifted, trying to find her, trying to make sense of the world around him. Emma pressed the call button with shaking hands. Someone, please, he is waking up. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Nurses rushed in, followed by a doctor. They moved quickly, checking vitals, shining lights into his eyes, adjusting the oxygen tube. Emma stepped back but refused to leave entirely. She stood at the foot of the bed, her hands clasped tightly, her breath trembling with every beat of the monitor. "His responses are returning," the doctor said. "He is trying to come out of the coma." One of the nurses gently instructed Emma, "Talk to him." Familiar voices helped guide orientation. Emma nodded and stepped closer again. "Grant," she said softly, "I am here. You are safe." His eyes shifted toward her voice. For a brief moment, they landed on her face. Confusion rippled across his features. But there was something else there, too. Recognition. Faint but present, as though her voice had lived somewhere deep inside him during all those silent months. His lips moved again, struggling for sound. "Do not force it," Emma said tenderly. "You just woke up. Take your time." The doctor adjusted the bed so Grant could breathe more comfortably. "He is very weak," the doctor explained. "Orientation will come slowly. Memory may take longer. But this is a significant step." Emma nodded, her eyes never leaving Grant's face. She watched as he tried to lift his hand, muscles trembling with the effort. She reached out instinctively, offering her fingers. His hand curled faintly around hers, the grasp delicate but intentional. "You held my hand," she whispered. "All night, you were trying. And now you are here." Grant's breathing steadied. His gaze drifted to the embroidered handkerchief on the table. He stared at it longer than anything else in the room. Emma followed his eyes and felt a lump rise in her throat. "That is mine," she said softly. "I kept it with you, so you would not feel alone." A quiet whisper slipped from his lips, barely audible. "Who?" Emma's heart squeezed. She swallowed and leaned closer. "My name is Emma," she said. "I have been taking care of you." His brows pulled together, trying to understand. He blinked again, eyes clouded with exhaustion but searching. "Why, here." The doctor stepped in gently. "He will only manage a few words at a time today. Keep answers simple." Emma nodded and took a slow breath. "I am here because you needed someone," she said softly, "and I chose to stay." His breathing deepened, and another hint of recognition crossed his features, the kind that comes not from memory, but from instinctive trust, as if her voice had kept him tethered to life more than anyone understood. The machines steadied, the room calmed. Nurses cleared out one by one, leaving Emma and Grant again in a quiet that now felt entirely different from before. Emma sat beside him once more, her voice warm and steady. "You are not alone anymore, Grant. I promise you that." And for the first time, his eyelids lowered and lifted in a subtle nod, as if answering her promise with one of his own. Grant slept on and off through the next hours, drifting in and out of shallow consciousness as the doctors monitored his progress. Each time he opened his eyes, even for a second, Emma felt her heart lift and tighten all at once. He was here. He was fighting. But every moment of clarity was followed by exhaustion that pulled him back under. By late afternoon, he seemed stronger. His eyes stayed open longer, tracking the movement of the nurses. He gripped the blanket weakly, testing his fingers. He even turned his head slightly when Emma spoke, as if her voice anchored him in a way nothing else could. But with this progress came new shadows. A man in a tailored suit appeared at the door, holding a tablet and wearing an expression that carried power and impatience. Emma froze the moment she saw him. She had met him once, Grant's older cousin, Richard Morgan, the one who had presented the marriage contract to her family under the guise of a business arrangement. He stepped inside as if he owned the room. "So," Richard said sharply, "he is awake." Emma stiffened. "He just opened his eyes. He is still very weak." Richard approached the bed, looking down at Grant with a tight jaw. "Grant," he said loudly, "can you hear me?" Grant blinked slowly, his brows drawing together. It was not recognition. It was discomfort. "He should not be overwhelmed," Emma said quietly. The doctor said Richard cut her off without turning. "I did not ask for your commentary." The cold dismissal stung, but she stood her ground. "I am here because he needs calm." Not shouting, Richard finally turned to her, eyes narrowing. "You are here because of a contract. Nothing more." Emma felt the breath catch in her throat. "I stayed because he needed someone." she said softly. And he is waking up. That should matter. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do not pretend this is anything more than what it is. You were chosen because you were convenient. Your family needed money. We needed a name to stabilize legal matters. Nothing about this was sentimental. Emma clenched her hands to keep them from shaking. That does not change the fact that he is responding, she said, and he responds more when I am here. Richard scoffed. Please. He would respond to anyone after months in a coma. Do not mistake coincidence for importance. He turned back to Grant, tapping the tablet. We will need to discuss business once you regain full consciousness. There are matters you left unresolved. The board is waiting. Grant blinked again, and his hand twitched weakly toward Emma. Richard did not notice, but Emma did. She stepped forward instinctively. Maybe you should give him space, she said carefully. He is not ready for this. Richard's expression hardened. You do not speak for this family. Before Emma could reply, Grant's voice emerged, rough and strained. Stop! Both of them froze. Grant's eyes were open, glassy but focused. His breathing was unsteady, but the word had been clear. Richard leaned forward. Grant? Say that again. What do you mean? Grant blinked slowly. He lifted one trembling hand toward Emma, weak, shaking, but unmistakably reaching for her. Emma caught his hand gently, supporting it with both of hers. Richard's eyes narrowed. What is this? Grant! Why are you Grant swallowed with effort? His voice barely a whisper. Stay. Emma felt her chest tighten. She leaned closer. I am here. I am not going anywhere. Richard clenched his jaw. He is confused. He does not know what he is saying. But Grant's fingers tightened around Emma's hand, weak but deliberate. Richard's tone sharpened. Let go of him. Emma refused to move. He asked me to stay. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Richard stepped back, anger simmering beneath his calm facade. Enjoy this moment, he said coldly. When he remembers everything, this little arrangement will not last. With that, he turned on his heel and left the room. The door clicked shut, and the tension drained into a heavy quiet. Emma looked down at Grant again. His eyes were half closed, exhaustion pulling at him, but he was still holding her hand. She squeezed gently. You did well, she whispered. You really did. Grant's lips parted. A faint breath emerged, barely a word. Stay. Tears blurred her vision, but her voice stayed steady. I will, she whispered. I promise. The monitor steadied. Grant's breathing evened. And as he drifted back into a fragile sleep, Emma held his hand, unaware that the moment he had chosen her in front of his family had shifted the entire balance of power in the Morgan world, and that storm was only beginning. The next morning, the hospital room felt charged with a kind of quiet determination. Emma woke early, startled by the sound of someone speaking softly near the bed. When she sat up, she realized it was Grant. His voice was hoarse, barely more than breath, but he was trying to form words with focus that had not been there the day before. She stood quickly, leaning over him. Grant, I am here. I am listening. His eyes met hers, clearer than before. Where am I? He whispered. You are in the hospital, she said gently. You have been here for months. You were in a coma, but you are waking up now. He swallowed hard. How long? 6 months, she replied softly. You were hurt in a car crash. He blinked slowly, absorbing the information. A flicker of fear crossed his eyes, then confusion. Why, you? Emma hesitated. She knew this moment would come the moment he would demand answers. She was not sure she could give without breaking under the weight of them. You needed someone, she said honestly. And I was the one who stayed. He studied her face, searching for something familiar. A slow breath shook through him. I remember. Your voice, he whispered. In the dark. You were there. Emma's breath caught. I talked to you every day. I hoped, somehow, you would hear. I did. His fingers tightened weakly around hers. You kept me alive. Before Emma could speak, the door swung open. Richard strode inside with 2 board members behind him. Their expressions were calculating, cold, and far too eager for a man who had nearly died. Grant, Richard said briskly, the doctors say you are stable enough for a short conversation. The company needs decisions made immediately. Emma stepped in front of them instinctively. He just woke up. He cannot handle this. Richard dismissed her with a sharp gesture. He is a Morgan. He will handle it. Grant's voice, weak but firm, broke through the tension. No. Business. Richard blinked. What did you say? Grant lifted his hand slightly, signaling him to stop. No business. Not with you. Not now. Richard stiffened. Grant, you do not understand how much has happened. I understand, Grant murmured, his gaze sharpening. I heard enough. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Richard's jaw tightened. Grant turned his head toward Emma again. Emma stays. Richard exhaled hard. This is ridiculous. She is no one. Grant's eyes snapped open wider, and for the first time since waking there was fire behind them. She is my wife. The room froze. Even Emma felt the air leave her lungs. Grant, Richard said slowly, you do not remember everything. This marriage, I remember her voice, Grant interrupted. I remember her hand. And I remember that when everyone else left me, she did not. Richard sputtered. This changes nothing legally. She was part of a contract, a convenience. Grant's voice grew stronger. Then I choose her, not the contract. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Richard's composure cracked, anger seeping through. This is your emotion talking. When you recover fully, you will regret this. Grant lifted his hand, weak but unwavering. Leave. Richard hesitated, searching for authority he no longer possessed. Now, Grant whispered. Defeated, Richard backed away and motioned for the others to follow. The door closed behind them, leaving the room in a silence that vibrated with something powerful. Emma stood frozen, her heart racing. Grant, you did not have to do that. You do not owe me. I owe you everything, he said, his voice barely above a breath. You stayed. You saved me in ways no one else even tried. She shook her head, tears forming. I stayed because someone needed to. No, he whispered. You stayed because you cared. And I felt it. Even when I could not move, I felt it. He reached for her hand again. His touch was weak but full of intention. Emma, do not leave. She stepped closer, tears slipping down her cheeks. I am not leaving. A faint smile touched his lips. Good. Then let me say this while I can. His eyes softened. I woke up because of you. Emma's breath caught. She sat beside him, taking both his hands gently. I will stay, she whispered, for as long as you want me here. Grant exhaled slowly, as if releasing the last remnants of the darkness he had been trapped in. I want you here, he murmured. More than anything, the monitor steadied into a calm, steady rhythm. Outside, the city lights blinked softly through the window. Inside, for the first time since the crash, Grant Morgan was not fighting alone. Emma sat there holding his hand, unaware that this moment, the moment he chose her in full consciousness, was the beginning of something neither of them had dared to imagine. A second chance, a new life, a love born between breath and silence, and now finally awake. Grant's recovery over the next week was slow but determined. Physical therapists visited daily, helping him sit up, stretch his muscles, and regain his strength step by fragile step. Each session left him exhausted, yet the moment they ended, he always looked for one person first, Emma. She stayed by his side every morning, reading to him, helping him drink water, adjusting his pillows, or simply sitting close enough so he could hear her voice. Every time he drifted to sleep, she stayed a little longer, as if afraid her absence might pull him backward into the darkness he had fought so hard to escape. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the hospital window and spread over the bed like a warm blanket, Grant lifted his hand slightly. Emma, he whispered. She leaned in immediately. I am here. What do you need? He looked down at the embroidered handkerchief on the table, the same one she had placed there on the first day. His fingers trembled as he pointed toward it. That was with me, he said slowly. I remember the sound of your voice, and that cloth. It meant I was not alone. Emma picked it up gently and placed it in his hand. I am glad it reached you, she said softly. It is all I had to give. Grant held it with care, pressing it weakly against his chest. It kept me alive, he whispered. Before she could speak, the door opened again. Richard appeared, this time without the board members, but his expression was no warmer than before. "I heard you have made remarkable progress," Richard said stiffly. "The board wants an update. We will need to prepare statements," and Grant lifted his hand, stopping him. "No business. Not yet." Richard exhaled sharply. "Grant, you cannot hide behind this woman forever." Emma stepped back at the insult, but Grant's gaze sharpened. "Her name is Emma," he said, "and she is the reason I am alive. Show some respect." Richard stilled. The authority in Grant's voice was unmistakable, weak in volume, but absolute in command. "You may leave now," Grant added. Richard hesitated, glaring at Emma for a final moment, then turned and left. The door clicked shut, sealing the tension outside. The room softened again. Grant looked at Emma. "I know what he said, and I know what he thinks. I remember parts of what my family did. I want to understand everything when I am strong enough." Emma looked down, her hands wringing nervously. "Some things may hurt to hear." He reached for her hand, his voice steady. "Tell me anyway. I trust you." Her breath caught. Those words, spoken so simply, filled the room like a promise. Later that evening, after his therapy session, Grant asked her to wheel him to the small balcony outside the ward. The nurses helped him into a wheelchair, and Emma guided him toward the cold, crisp air. City lights shimmered below them, stretching far into the distance. For a moment, neither spoke. Grant closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. "I have been asleep for so long," he said. "Everything feels new." Emma smiled softly. "It will come back. All of it. With time." He nodded. "Maybe. But some things I do not want to remember, and some things I want to start over entirely." He turned his head toward her, eyes steady. "I want to start over with you." Emma froze. "Grant, I do not know where the contract ends and where the truth begins," he said. "But I know what I feel when you talk. I know how I felt when I saw your face for the first time after waking up. And I know that, before anything else, I want to choose you because I want to, not because paperwork said so." Emma blinked, her throat tightening. "You are still healing. You do not need to decide anything now." Grant reached into his blanket with trembling fingers. The handkerchief rested there, folded neatly. He held it out to her. "This kept me alive," he said. "But you brought me back." Tears filled her eyes. "I want my life to begin again from here," he whispered, "with you beside me. If you will stay." Emma sank to her knees beside the wheelchair, placing her hand over his. "I stayed before I knew you. I stayed when everyone else walked away. And I will stay now, not because I have to, but because I want to." Grant's eyes softened, a smile trembling across his lips. "Then let me say this," he murmured. "Emma, will you stay with me not as a contract, not as a title, but as the person who helped me find my way back?" Her voice broke into a quiet, trembling whisper. "Yes, I will." The city lights glowed around them, and for the first time since the accident, Grant Morgan felt whole not because he had returned to the world, but because someone had been waiting for him when he did. Their hands remained joined, warm against the cold night air. A life had ended in silence 6 months ago. A new one began here, between breath and love, wide awake.